And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you tonight on this May 8th, 2025? I hope everybody is well. Of course, well, there it is. Hello. I don't know why it defaults to that. It's kind of weird. Anyway, welcome. It's RickCast. Special on Pope Leo XIV being elected as the newest Holy Father. And yeah, I know I usually talk about all kinds of things, but it's the biggest news story in the world. I want to put a coda on it. I want my thoughts to be known. This show is open, obviously, for the comment section. I would love to have the comment section make sure that they are as active as possible tonight, because the election of the Holy Father has not been received too well by MAGA. And I think that's a problem. Now, I will give you, I know it's my misogyny warning, but since I'm not doing any misogyny, I'll do another warning. The opinions expressed tonight by me, Rick Barrett, will be labeled as a Pope splainer, because I am going to try and come at you with a decent and balanced view of the situation, instead of rage baiting and freaking out based on emotion, which a lot more people have done. And I'm not singling out any specific show or podcast by saying that. I am addressing both the left and the right, and the way they try to instantly identify somebody based on previous history and everything else that we know people do here on the interwebs. People have a tendency to make judgments about stuff fairly quickly. So that is not going to be the case tonight. We are going to try and talk about this in a manner that is respectful of the Holy Father, because despite what everybody says, he is the Holy Father. Now, I know my SSPX brothers will disagree with me, and I love you guys. That's cool. That's your opinion. You know, Father Ratzinger has a great talk on the SSPX. You know, you guys should be regular and all that stuff, but it is what it is. I don't want to get into that. But the fact of the matter is, in this instant reaction society that we exist in, this need to get it out first society, this idea that we must cover this and we must give it through the lens of American politics, is actually quite I don't want to say disturbing, upsetting, because that sounds very petty, and I don't want to be that way. So the fact of the matter is, I didn't go live on Getter. All right, Getter. Hello. I'm sorry I didn't let you guys on. I haven't talked about anything yet. Good evening to YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, and Getter. If you're just showing up on Getter, I was just explaining that tonight's show will be a coda on the conclave and my initial thoughts, and pretty much my final thoughts I will make on Pope Leo XIV. I almost said Francis, but Pope Leo XIV. Not really gonna, this will not be a channel that every time he says something, we will react to it, because I don't know. I just don't know. I don't believe that's my place. My place is to talk about the news. Really, I want to talk about guns. But this is the only thing that gets any kind of traction. So it is what it is in that regard. So the fact of the matter is, tonight's show is based on Pope Leo. The fact that I am happy that we have a chair, somebody to sit in the chair of St. Peter. Obviously, it is not who I wanted, but it is not my will. It is the will of the Lord that needs to be done in this regard. So we are going to be talking about all of that tonight. Don't know how long the show is going to go. Usually goes a little over an hour. But because I also haven't looked at anything else today, so I wouldn't be too helpful as far as commentary on that, because all I've been focused on, like the rest of the world, is the election of the Holy Father. And it's interesting to see how both sides want to claim or disown or give their 2 cents. And obviously, everybody is more than welcome to their opinion, or else what the hell am I doing on this show right now, right? But I think it's also dangerous. And the reaction that we have seen today on X, because I don't go anywhere else. And that's really the place for instant terrible reactions, which is instant reactions. I don't want to say terrible, just instant reactions. This is what I was warning about a couple weeks ago after Pope Francis died. And everybody started saying, we need this cardinal. I mean, we need this pope. We need that pope. We need this guy. We need that guy. Granted, I get it. It's nice to be able to say, oh, and I had my picks. I had my guys that I thought would be great. But in the end, all it did was poison the well for Pope Leo XIV. It poisoned the well for him. And it's not particularly great because not only does the left come after us, they'll, even conservatives on the right now, people that I respect, dumping on the Holy Father because he's supposedly an open borders liberal, blah, 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 whatever. He's a Pope Francis II, yada, yada, yada. All of that being said, this should be one of the few days that the church is united and is celebrating, right? Days like these are good days because we don't really know much about Pope Leo the 14th. And we're going to go through that. And we're going to talk about it. But the fact is, people already have a pretty bad taste in their mouth when it comes to him. And the guy hasn't been Pope for 12 hours. So, I don't know. Let me know. Comment section is open if anybody wants to jump in on it and give me your opinions as such tonight on RickCast. Or maybe people don't want to give maybe people are just kind of holding their powder and keeping their powder dry until a later date. But the fact is, people, at least the conservative bros are not happy today. And I get it. I'm more traditionally minded, and I understand that it is not it's not what we wanted. But at the same time, I'm not going to come out here and start doom scrolling and things like that, or doom prophesizing right now, because it's just stupid to do so. It really is. It doesn't help us in any way, shape, or form. And I must remind my brothers and sisters in Christ that we are the people of faith, hope, and charity. Not a lot of hope today. Like I said, today is not going to be a fun episode for many people, but since I am kind of on the outskirts of Catholic YouTube, it gives me more freedom to kind of say whatever I need to say because I'm not afraid of offending anybody. And the fact of the matter is, the conservative bros on Catholic Twitter are not happy. They're not happy because they didn't get their way. Okay, I get it. But the second point, and this is going to be more of the crux of today's show, is we really got to stop putting the Catholic Church in the lens of American politics, like everybody else does, like that psycho Laura Loomer. Yeah, I use her stuff. She's good. She's a good reporter. That doesn't mean she's not an absolute psycho, which she is. But it is, it's not great that we have gotten to a point where everything needs to be looked through. He's anti-Trump. He's anti-Vance. Trump and Vance aren't going to be there forever. The Pope is going to be there until he dies. Most likely. I mean, notwithstanding another Pope Benedict XVI situation. But it is what it is in that regard. So let's see. Let's just get to it. For those of you that missed it today, this was the entrance of Pope Leo XIV after the white smoke was released. I think it was around like 12:30 1231, and then he came out a little later. The crazy thing is that he was announced, and my first thought was, the dude's American? Because I swore up and down that the Catholic Church would never elect an American pope. Just too much power, too much influence. And I thought that was something that the Italians would never do. I didn't think the Italians would ever give the Americans that. But it's interesting to note, and we'll get into it as we go along in the program. But at this moment, this was the moment that the Holy Father came out the first time. Now, to be fair, it wasn't a bad sign, because Pope Leo XVI is at least wearing the correct vestments. He's wearing the correct garb. He is respectful to the faith in that regard, or to the traditions in that regard. Remember, Pope Francis just came out in a white cassock because he didn't want to do any of those things. He didn't want to wear the shoes. He didn't want to, we all know, because he's so humble. He was so humble. At least Leo XIV is appearing papal. I don't know if that means much to people. If we're going based on first impressions and based on how things are, it's a good first impression that he is there. And it's a good look. Obviously, would I have preferred if Cardinal Sarah was here? Yes. If I preferred if Cardinal Pizzaballa was there? Yes. If I preferred Erdo, I think that's, or Ergo. Yes. There's about 5 or 6 that I would have preferred as a quote unquote more traditionally minded Catholic. But this is who we are, and this is who we have. And I think it bears repeating that God gives us the Pope we deserve, not the one we want. I think people need to understand that more and more, is that we get the Pope, at least as Catholics, we believe we get the Pope we deserve and not the Pope that we want. And so it's very interesting in that regard how instantaneous the reaction was to it. But the first view is at least he is wearing the correct vestments and respecting the position, the title, not like Francis, who didn't. So that's a good sign. I mean, this goes on for like another 2 minutes. And the whole point is that the position is filled. The church is once again led. Of course, a lot of people will say bad, good, whatever the case may be. Now, I mean, he just kind of stands there for a long time, but the magistry and the pageantry was there, and he respected it, and he embraced it. So I'm going to say that's good on that one. And then the second one is where he gives his first statements and his first blessings as Pope Leo XIV.
Sancti Apostoli Petrus et Paulus, de quorum potestate et auctoritate confidimus, ipsi intercedat pro nobis ad Dominum. Amen. Precibus et meritis Beate Mariae semper Virginis, Beati Michaelis Arcangeli, Beati Ioannis Baptiste, et Sanctorum Apostolorum Petri et Pauli et omnium sanctorum. Misereatur vestri omnipotens Deus, et dimissis omnibus peccatis vestris, perducat vos Iesus Christus ad vitam aeternam.
I'm muted again. Prayers were done in Latin. Okay, he came out in the vestments. He prayed in Latin. So those first two things you'd have to say are positive, but we had ourselves so riled up. We were so riled up. We have to have this cardinal. We have to have him. He has to be MAGA. You know, MAGA is pro IVF, right? And pro unjust war, right? But open borders. Okay. All right. I get it. I get it. But some of y'all, once again, I'm going to give you the Pope splainer, my just general warning. Some of y'all are way too loyal to MAGA and not loyal to the church. Some of y'all have made idols out of MAGA. And that's dangerous. You sound like Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer is a psycho non-Catholic. Of course she's going to be like, he's non-MAGA and all these other things. You sound like the Protestants today. Today is the one stinking day you should shut up and celebrate. Because right now, Pope Leo XIV is a blank canvas. He has not done anything yet. At least with Francis, when he came out without the vestments and all the other things, there was like, ooh, and he took the name Francis, everybody was like, ooh, that's not a good sign. What has Pope Leo XIV done to scare you? Some tweets? I'm sure everybody's had a bad tweet here or there. Now, there are things we are going to discuss. Hey, G. There are things we will discuss that are potentially problems. And yes, he comes out of Chicago. Not great, obviously. But it's God's church. And I'm not saying God picked him. Obviously, the College of Cardinals picked him. But the fact is, yeah. Oh, I understand. When people say that, I get it. I don't share the hesitancy. I understand the hesitancy. I understand it. All right. Supich was very pleased. Father Martin was very pleased at this selection. Not great. 100%. Not that's right. He's Peruvian, my brother says. He's not, it's not a great look. I'm not discounting that at all. I'm not discounting that at all. And I want people to think I am. I'm not sweeping that under the table. But now that we have him here, let's kind of take a look at who he is, or at least what the College of Cardinals report says about him. Because that's the only information we have right now. Give me that. First of all, when they announced him, I couldn't find the guy on the website. He wasn't one of the top 10, 15, 20 picks. He's like Shedeur Sanders. By the way, I think Shedeur Sanders is still waiting to be drafted by the college. But this man was nowhere to be found, right? Outside of the top picks that of course, Steve Bannon, I don't have the clip. Steve Bannon actually said he was a dark horse. And we didn't think about that because we were so set on hoping, which is fine, for our guy. Hoping for our guy, which I get. Some key data points. He's 69 years old. That's very young in terms of popes. We were like, oh man, well, if they elect like Sarah or one of these other guys, Parolin, I think that is the Vatican Secretary of State. Guy's 70 years old. He's 1 year older. So you're looking at, what was Pope Francis in his 80s when he died? So if he follows the trajectory of Pope Francis, you're looking at a 20-year papacy here, which is interesting because somebody like the Catholic Traveler said a lot of popes won't want to elect a young a lot of cardinals don't want to elect a young pope because they want to vote again in another one soon enough. The idea was that they were going to want to come back and forth. Folks, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to welcome to the program, because I think it was just going to be me, the one and only, ladies and gentlemen, Catholic Comedy. Good afternoon, sir.
Hey, yeah, I got the time wrong. I thought that it was 6 o'clock. When you said 6 Central, I was completely wrong. I was completely off. I was thinking 6 Pacific, which is
Time zones ruin me. They
time
ruin me.
zones ruin everyone.
Yeah,
I'm in my room, by the way.
good.
So
That's nice.
this is where I live.
This is technically where I live too. Not in this specific room, but I live in this home. But thank you for joining me, brother.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about today. I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting like next week to have new pope. But now we got new pope.
I think everybody expected that too, especially after the elongated format of the first vote. Everybody went, ooh, this looks like this is going to be set up for a pretty rough conclave, and people are going to be going back and forth. And then the next day, it was like, oh, no, we got it.
Yeah, it was rather surprising. And then when they're announcing, they were like, and then they're like I heard like Cardinal Roberto, and I was like, Robert, is it Sarah? And then like they kept talking, and I couldn't hear
Yep.
what they were saying because it's Latin, so it was difficult. And then someone's like, oh, this is, and then they popped up the name of the Pope, and I was like, oh, I have no idea who that is.
I went to the College of Cardinals report site, and I'm like, Prevost, but I couldn't find him until somebody actually put his name up on one of the screens. But going back, it actually doesn't shock me. A couple people said that they had him lined up. Somebody like Steve Bannon said that he was a dark horse last week. And considering his position and the fact that he was there on the board to pick many of the bishops, doesn't shock me that he was there to be selected.
Yeah, I mean, when you like it, when you Monday morning quarterback it, it makes a lot of sense, Yeah,
100%, because it's like, oh, it totally makes sense now.
I thought that it was going to be, Surah, and I had thoughts behind it because I figured they'd be like tossing, tossing a bone to the conservatives, and he's 80 years old, so they figured they could just get a new pope in 5 years.
There was a lot. I think, yeah, go ahead.
But that was my thought. And then, but this guy's like 69 years old, so he's going to be around for like 15, 20 years. I mean, yeah. God willing, if he makes it to his 80s. So
that was something. There's a guy called the Catholic Traveler who I follow on all the. He's a travel coordinator in Rome and Jerusalem, and he lives in Rome, and he knows a lot of the people inside the Vatican. And one of his thoughts a couple days ago, before the conclave began, he says, I don't think they're going to pick a young pope because a lot of these cardinals want to vote in a future election because they think they might want to be pope. So I don't think they're going to go too young. That's what he said. So he was wrong on that, but he was correct that he said it probably isn't going to take more than 2 days to get this done because they'll just come in and take care of it. But yeah, if you follow the same track, because Pope Francis was 88. So, I mean, if you get that, you're looking at a good 20 years.
Right. Benedict was 92 when he died, something like that. Yep. I mean, if he stayed on, he would have had another 10 years of his papacy before he died. But Francis died at 88, Benedict at 92. But you know what they say, only the good die young. So we'll see what happens.
Well, he's an American, so who knows how many cheeseburgers he's had. Because all those other popes had those European diets.
Right. This is the only pope with microplastics.
That's right. And Chicago deep dish running through his veins.
That's right.
But so your thoughts on him from the, I'm only phrasing this just to get the point across. I don't mean it. The reactionary trad an initial analysis of him, because you wanted Sarah, I wanted Pizza Balla or Ergo or Sarah, all the guys that we wanted, they didn't get it. like Burke, none of those guys got it. So we were obviously disappointed. And social media kind of, at least on the conservative side, was kind of gassing up for 2 weeks. We need Sarah. We need Sarah. We need Sarah.
Right.
Honestly, I thought so too. And then he comes out and they're just like, it's Sarah, it's over. We're terrible. And
it's just a terrible way of living your life. I like to call those people doomcasters, where no matter what happened, even if Sarah was elected, they would come out and find a way to be like, oh, he was elected, but he probably had to make concessions to get there, or he's probably, or like in the first week, they're gonna be like, he hasn't reversed Traditionis Custodes yet. What's going on? It's like, he's still moving into the Vatican. Give him some time. That's like, this guy, he's been Pope for all of like 20 minutes, and already we have op-eds about how he's a terrible Pope. And the sedes are jumping in saying like, no, he's not a valid Pope. And it's like, how do you become a valid Pope, sedes? How does that happen now?
yeah.
But I mean, it gives, you have to have a modicum of hope, that like things like, for Francis wasn't fantastic. And I don't think anyone's going to say that Francis was the best Pope ever, except for people who are eulogizing and canonizing him. But he wasn't fantastic. There was a lot of issues with his pontificate. There were a lot of issues with the way that he handled certain situations. But for what it's worth, he wasn't like, he was quiet about things he should have spoken about, but he didn't like sell the Vatican out, right? He didn't go, and he was quiet about a lot of things, and he let people talk who probably should have stayed quiet, but he didn't make huge changes to the actual faith. And whenever you talk to him and he was in an interview, he would always say, like, that's the pictures that you would have, like the memes that we have of him, where like when he's talking to that lady about whether or not there's going to be female priests, and he said no, just no. And like he I'm not going to say he was the most orthodox Pope. I'm not going to say that he was a staunch conservative or whatever, but he wasn't as bad as a lot of people were portraying him to be. And he's not as great as some other people were portraying him. He was kind of a middle of the road, probably a very forgettable Pope. And then over the next couple of centuries, it'll be one of those where like, oh yeah, there was that weird period where we had a Francis between Benedict XVI and Leo the XIV. We had this weird pontificate that happened. So I'm not a doomcaster. I mean, as my name suggests, I don't really, I try to push for hope. And this guy's had 5 minutes in the chair, so let's give him some time, see what he does, and judge him based on what he does, as opposed to judging him based on what he had to do underneath a pontificate that may have pushed him to be more one way or the other way. Like, now he's the guy in charge. He gets to decide how he wants to run the church, who he wants to promote, and maybe he'll surprise us, or maybe the doomcasters are right about him 100%. But we should at least give him a chance to screw up before we declare that he has screwed up.
You're right about that. And for Francis, his biggest error, a lot of people will say, was his attack on the Latin Mass. If he never went after the Latin Mass full bore, I don't think anyone really would have cared too much about his papacy. It would have been very milquetoast. It was his war against the Latin Mass that really made him, target number one for a lot of those guys. And I get it, because I've had a Latin Mass in Austin shut down. St. Mary's, Cathedral St. Mary's, it used to be a Latin Mass. Now it's not. That's great. It stinks, but we move around and we deal with it. I think a lot of people's biggest problem with Pope Leo the 14th is his involvement with the removal of Bishop Strickland. That's going to be everybody's big thing they're going to point to. But you made a great point that he was being a loyal soldier at that point. Was it his idea?
Well, I was actually just talking to my wife about this, right? Strickland, whether you agree with him or not, he came out and publicly basically declared Pope Francis to be the anti-pope. Like, he publicly came out and said that he was leading the church, or he was leading the church down the path to destruction. And whether or not you agree with him on that, imagine if you were to come out and like go on a podcast and talk about how your boss is going to bring the company to ruin publicly and so so Pope Francis sends over, people to say, hey, cut that out. Like, we can't have this division in the church for you to go out there and publicly declare something like that, whether or not he was right about it. You can't, if you publicly declare that, that something's going to happen. You don't go and talk about how terrible your boss is and then expect to get a promotion, right? You talk about how terrible your boss is, you're fired. Like, that just is what's going to happen. And so you have this cardinal who's part of the team, and what he was asserting was not necessarily that that Strickland was a bad Catholic, like it was a person non grata, right? He was deciding whether or not Strickland was against Pope Francis, was sowing dissent amongst the laity, was sowing dissent amongst the priests, and whether or not that was a righteous thing to do, he definitely was doing it. So when you talk about how this cardinal, who is now Pope Leo XIV, when you talk about his involvement with that, yeah, he was involved with it, but like we had this. I remember when I was in high school, we did this the trial of Socrates,
Mm-hmm.
where we were all supposed to be the jury, and like what happened to Socrates was unfair to happen to him, right? Because he was right about many of the things that he was saying, but he was also breaking the laws, or the Greek laws, and so whether he was guilty or not, it is not determined whether or not what he was doing was right. It was determining whether he was breaking the law. And so you think about Strickland's removal, while tragic, because I think he was I think he is a good bishop, and that he was trying to lead his people, to righteousness. I think that that there's no way you would have been able to look at that situation and remedy it other than to remove him or remove Francis. There was this fight that was happening, and Strickland decided to be a vocal opponent, right? It's just like Vigano. Vigano decides that he's going to be a vocal opponent of the papacy, of the current seat of Peter, or at the time, and so he gets excommunicated because he said that the Pope was an anti-pope, and you can't just do that and expect the Pope to say that's fine, because the next thing you know, you're going to have, like if on the right side we start declaring that Pope Francis was invalid, right, or is invalid, right, then on the left side they're going to do the same thing, but for the opposite reasons, right? It's like he's not
how the U.S. now treats impeachment. Everybody gets impeached now.
Right, everyone gets impeached because it's our way of showing that we dislike the path that the country is on, as opposed to whether or not a law has been broken, right? And so that's what's going to happen in our country, because we've established that as precedent. But for Strickland, he was pushing on people and he got pushed back in a way that you should kind of expect when you say, like, if I came out and publicly declared Pope Leo the 14th that he is the anti-pope, then he would have every right to excommunicate me, because I'm saying that the person who is in the seat of Peter does not belong to be in the seat of Peter, and that pushes me out of the church.
Yeah, especially without cause, right? Unless you have
right.
Proof
Even if
things that you can put there, then you're being slanderous almost.
Right. Even if you have cause, you have to be cautious, because that is there has to be so much evidence that you have cardinals on your side that are willing to stand up and say it. And Strickland didn't have cardinals on his side that were willing to stand up and say it. Strickland had a bunch of podcasters on his side that were willing to stand up and say it, but podcasters hold zero weight in the church.
Also, my whole thing with Strickland is I feel like those podcasters almost goaded him into those responses for those things, which is why it's always very dangerous to look at that. This is an interesting comment here from Andrew Smith. There's a guy named Leo Zagmini who just went on Alex Jones. He says that Pope Leo XIV was chosen to combat Trump on issues such as immigration, gun control, all of the quote unquote left leaning issues. You don't have to worry about the Alex Jones reference. We don't hate Alex Jones on this channel. He's great. But the fact is, Taylor Marshall has said that, and a couple other people have said that. And I don't doubt that there was a certain element of pushback. That's why I never thought they would elect a Catholic American for Pope, to be completely honest with you, because I don't think they wanted to give him that win, right? To have one from America with Trump there and all this other kind of stuff. But yeah, he may, or he may not. Like you said, you brought up a great point. He's the guy in the seat now. You're
Right.
different as it's different when you're an employee versus the manager. People are
Right.
always very, they don't understand. Well, you were super cool as a co-employee. Well, I'm not a co-employee anymore, bro. I'm the manager. So I got to do things in my way.
Well, and he has like, so you look at his old Twitter account, which will probably be archived and blocked and, all that type of stuff. It'll be ghosted at some point, just push to the archives of the internet. Because you can't have a Pope's private account now active out there. But you can look at that, and he made some political comments that are fine for a cardinal, for a Peruvian cardinal to just make comments on things, that are not fine for the Roman pontiff to make comments on things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if he has a personal dislike of American politics and American politicians, he's still going to have to work with them, because head of state is head of state, no matter who the head of state is. The head of state, and
apparently
since he's
Trump's
the head of state,
apparently Trump's going to go meet him next week.
Sure, I'm sure he will. I'm sure that they will have a photo op or something like that. But even if they decided they were going to try to put him in there to combat Trumpian politics, right? There's a difference between the way that a country needs to be run from a political perspective and a way that a person should organize their lives from a religious perspective. Which is why I've always thought it weird when it's like, what does the Pope think about immigration? Like, what does the Pope think about immigration? Like, the Pope can have his personal opinion on immigration. He can even have a political opinion on immigration, but the Pope is not in charge of the immigration policies of other countries. The Pope is in charge, or to tell you to say how you, Rick, can be a moral person, and what would constitute being a moral person. All right, like, Trump is outside of the church. He doesn't have to recognize the authority of the Pope generally. I mean, he should, because the Pope has authority over him regardless of whether he wants to or not, but he doesn't have to recognize it. But there's no canonical action that any Pope can take against a Trumpian type figure, a Protestant who is in charge of a country that is mostly non-Catholic, although that could sway in the next couple of years. We'll see. But there's no reason why like Trump has to listen to the Pope, so the Pope can say anything he wants, right? But like when Joe Biden was the president, I think the Pope has to be more quiet about those things, because the Pope actually can affect political things in a country by talking out against the head of that state. And that can cause other issues. Like, the Pope could have excommunicated Biden for his stance on abortion and transgender and stuff like that. But then that's going to create an animosity between an ostensibly Catholic president and the Holy See, which could lead to another Church of England type situation. Although it wouldn't be like that. It would just, Biden could just decide that he's going to be a Protestant now, and he becomes Presbyterian, and now the Presbyterians have a lot more sway on the politics. So it's this big kind of globulous thing that we have to kind of that the Pope has to deal with. And when he is just a cardinal in Peru saying whatever he wants to say, it's going to be much different than being the pontiff. And whether he's going to actually come out swinging against American politicians, or if he's going to focus in on healing the church, that's a decision he's going to make. There may have been a calculation on the part of the College of Cardinals that he would come out swinging against American politics because he's an American, but who knows?
That's very true. And also, when you go through digging his limited dossier, that's another thing. He's a complete blank slate at this point. Like you said, he hasn't made a lot of things, but he upholds the traditional doctrine. He's against female deacons. He's for the traditional marriage. He rejects progressive shifts on issues like gender ideology. So he's already different than Francis. Is he light years ahead? Is he Sarah? Is he all these other guys? No, but when you look
We,
at when you stare down the barrel of who we could have technically had, like a Zupi or a Tate or a Perolman, you know, I don't want to say we dodged a bullet, but we could be in a much better position than most people know.
and by the time we get another pope, the College of Cardinals is going to be a lot different. A lot of the people that we would be worried about today will be dead. It just is the reality of the situation. People that we wanted today, they will be dead, and people who we didn't want today, they will be dead. And he's going to be able to shape the next 100 years of the pontificate by being able to choose the cardinals that are going to replace all those cardinals that die. I mean, the
Mm.
first one he has to replace is his own position, and then he's going to move on from there. So he's going to choose someone to go into there, and we'll see that first choice could tell us a little bit about him, but we don't know much about who he is as pope. We
Yep.
know a bit about who he was as cardinal when he was being directed by Pope to do and say things, but we don't know who he is when he's off the chain, so to speak. He could be significantly more political, or he could decide that he doesn't want to be political and wants to focus in on getting rid of abuse within the church, right? Maybe the first action he's going to take is against the abusers of the church and start excommunicating people that need it. Maybe not. Maybe he's going to take a more soft approach. But those are the things we want to look for, and whether or not he cares about American politics are not the things that I'm really concerned about. Some people are. I'm not.
I kind of don't want my pope to be involved in American politics. In fact, I don't like the way that conservatives have taken MAGA and kind of tried to put the Catholic faith, shoving it
Uh,
through the prism of MAGA.
I
Like,
don't I don't like talking politics, but I am tired of people who worship politicians.
thank you.
Like
That's all you got to say. At that point.
I just I understand that politics can be important, but politics is not perfection. And like the Pharisees wanted Jesus to be political, and he staunchly refused to be political. And that's one of the reasons why he was put on the cross, was because they wanted, the ones that supported him were expecting him to toss the Romans out and to talk about how evil the Romans were to the Jewish people, and he didn't do that. He talked about personal salvation and how every person can get to, how every person could get to heaven, and that there was corruption in the church, and that that corruption needed to be answered. But he didn't talk about the Romans the way that a lot of people wanted the Messiah to talk about the Romans, and we don't want any, like Peter didn't talk about like the cruelty of the Romans. He talked about how we need to be one with Christ and how we're going to suffer. And every pope therein should be focusing on how to make sure that we get the most souls to heaven, not how to make sure that we get the most political points in office.
You know, I'd like to see, if I had a wish list for Pope Leo the 14th, I would like to see a return to um, the dedication of Catholic life, of people
Mm.
of Catholics recentering their life around the church, and ways to do that, and how to make every, you know, the book, like the way to become a saint, and all the, you know, how to emphasize the good of the church, and how positive Catholicism can make your daily life, and how to reincorporate those things, and the defense of things like the merit, the family, and so forth. That's what I would really like to see out of a pontificate, because that's what you want your father to really tell you, is how to make your life better
We
overall.
we need to focus on the joys of today, not the potential horrors of tomorrow. And that's where the church has always done well by talking about the joys of what you have today, as opposed to what terrible thing can happen. And politics has turned into what bad things will happen tomorrow, as instead of what good things are available today. And we've infused, politics has become the new religion to so many people. People who like to put little Vatican flags in their profile names, and then don't talk about the joy of parenthood, the joy of of Catholicism, the joy of prayer, the joy, like, they don't talk about what's joyous today. They talk about how the other guys are going to destroy the world tomorrow. Right. And it's
Mm,
like, if we don't,
yep.
if we have to vote here, or we have to vote there, or we have to protest here or protest there. Otherwise, the bad guys are going to destroy the world tomorrow. And like, somebody with a proper sense of humor and not like ha ha humor, but humor is the proper understanding of what is and isn't important, would realize that tomorrow is not guaranteed anyway, and that horror is the way of the world. Like, the world exists within perpetual horror, and if you can't find the joy of today, then you don't have hope for tomorrow. And if you don't have hope for tomorrow, then you live in despair. And if you live in despair, you have no hope of heaven. You have to get out of that despair, and you have to focus in on your personal joy, and not like your personal happiness, because that's a different thing, but your joy in life and the things that bring you joy. Like, you're married, right? You have kids.
Yeah,
That's
never had kids, but I am married.
You're married, so your marriage is joy, right? That's what brings you joy. You get off of this podcast and any other podcast that you're on, or your radio shows, or whatever it is that whatever you do during the day, and that's for everyone else on here. Like, you get off of whatever your working thing is, and you look, and you have to look, and you have to see where the joy is in your life, right? Like, where is the joy? Not the sin, not the pleasure, not the happiness, but the joy. That joy is that deep, like, it doesn't matter how bad your life is or how terrible things are happening to you. There's that joy, and that joy comes from Christ. That joy is where you can see that there's hope for you, that things are bad, but you know that Christ is there with you, and you're suffering for a reason, and like, you're suffering with purpose, and you're suffering well. A lot of us have that difficulty because we think of suffering as bad, and our modern culture tells us all suffering is bad. And so if you are suffering, it's this kind of prosperity gospel thing. If you're suffering, it's because you've done something wrong. So you have to figure out how you can get better, right? And the reality is that if you're suffering, it just means that you're living. There's always something, right? My wife is pregnant. She is suffering right now. She is like nauseous, and with that nausea and that, like, the all of the sickness that comes from the first few months of pregnancy are a way for God to show you that that stuff is working inside, right? The baby is alive, and the baby is well, and that's why you're suffering. You're suffering with purpose. And we need to remember how to suffer with purpose and to find joy in that, because the joy in the suffering of morning sickness is there's a baby. That's the joy. There is a baby that exists inside of you, for the women, and like, my helping her, the suffering that I have to do helping her, which isn't as bad as her suffering. I'm not going to get into that fight, but the suffering that I do for her, like waking up early, taking care of the kids, that going to, or like working during the day, taking as many breaks as I need to help her, that suffering has purpose and is good. That is good suffering. And I suffer well because I know that the suffering I do is worth something.
Exactly. That's fantastically put. Andrew has a good question for us here. How long do you think it will take for the identity to identify which way Leo is going? Overall, what do you think?
I think that I think we may think we know which way Leo is going in the first month. We may think we know which way he's going in the first year. We may think we know the way he's going in the first decade, but it'll be very difficult to know because he could change at any point, right? He could start out really bad and then turn to good. He could start out really good and then turn to bad. And so I will take it one day at a time.
We have some days where he's good and some days where
Yeah.
he's bad. And
you take it. Yeah, you just got to take it one day at a time. Like, if you say in the next 5 years we'll be able to see it, podcasters will theorize after it, and we all talk about the things that Dr. Marshall got right when he made his predictions about the things Francis was going to do, but we very, very rarely talk about the multitude of things that he got completely wrong with the way that Francis was going to do things, because it's kind of it's a difficult thing. It's a crapshoot, right? Maybe it's fine, maybe it's not. Maybe Traditionis Custodes means that at the end of the Latin Mass, or maybe it just brings it back to where it was the particular charisms that did it, right? Like, maybe we don't know. Maybe he's gonna do something crazy, because I remember for the last 2-3 years we've been hearing that that they're going to get rid of the FSSP and the ICKSP, and everyone's going to be pushed into the SSPX, and they're going to declare the SSPX in schism and get rid of everyone who went to that mass. It's like, but that didn't happen. Like, Traditionis Custodes is taking a long time to even take root, and it hasn't really taken root everywhere, and could be reversed tomorrow. But we had a lot of people who are predicting the end, and it hasn't been. The traditional Latin Mass is still very popular, and it hasn't been destroyed. So we'll see.
And just real quick before that question, we're talking about suffering. People are freaking out for whatever reasons because it's not their particular one, but they also neglect the fact that, yes, if they thought Francis was a difficult pope to be under, look at the amount of conversions we've had across the world. The English are converting at a massive rate. Africa is exploding. People are coming back to the faith here, whether it's the traditional Latin Mass, the Orthodox Mass, whatever the faith, under a supposedly bad pope. So even if Leo is the same, or in that manner, the Catholic Church thrives in these situations, and people don't like it when I say we as Americans, we're too fat and comfortable, and we feel like we deserve this and we deserve that. A little discomfort is good for your soul, as you were kind of saying in that regard. So you're uncomfortable with this pope. Well, guess what? Maybe you should pray and fast for him. Maybe you should take that disappointment and you should turn it and use it for the suffering souls in purgatory. Like, what can you do with this situation that God has granted you? Because it is a gift. Everything is a gift if you have the right mind frame that you were just talking about. Do you have that gift? All right. He's not my pope, but just because he's not my pope, I'm going to fast for a week for him, and I'm going to pray an extra rosary for him, for whatever the case may be. How are you going to be a better Catholic? How are you going to channel the gifts of the faith that you have into this supposed disappointment that you have? That's kind of the way we need to look at these things.
I'm going to say one more thing, and then I have to go because I have to go get a Chicago deep dish pizza that my wife ordered. Okay. So I remember a couple years ago when things were really rough. Think about 2000, 2001-ish, when things seemed really, really rough for the church. Like, masses were gone and everything. And I remember I sent an email to Father Dwight Longenecker. I don't know if you know him, but I sent an email to him and I said, "What am I supposed to do in these times? Because it is so difficult." And he sent me back just a scathing rebuke, saying, like we've had a relatively easy last 60 years of life in this church. Persecution is the norm. Suffering is the norm, and we have had it easy for decades upon decades. We should expect to have to suffer. We should expect to have to work, right? The church thrives when persecuted, and it dies when we let it rule, which is the weird thing to happen. But the more persecution that you put the church under, the stronger it is. That's why, like, the Chinese Catholic Church, prior to the deal that caused problem, but the underground church probably has the most saints we'll ever know from any particular place, because when you are forced to choose between comfort and faith, and you choose faith, that's your way to saintdom. That's your white martyrdom, and even red martyrdom, because you're choosing faith over something else. And for anyone who's listening here, like, if Leo XIV is the worst of the antipopes, if everything they say about him is true, and I'm not saying it is, but if everything they say about him is true, and he is the worst of the worst antipopes, right? It will be easier than ever to become a saint, because all you have to do is stay true to what the church teaches. You don't have to be like crawling on your knees over rocks 2.5 miles to Fatima or whatever it is, right? You don't have to do any of those things. All you have to do is believe in the faith and accept the persecution that you will get because of your faith. That's going to be enough to get into heaven. And that's kind of crazy. Like, Like, thinking about it, like the more persecution we have, the harder it is to be faithful. The lower the bar it is to be considered saintly. Because, like, the people in ancient Rome, right? They were Christians. They became saints because they secretly practiced their faith. Someone found out and they were murdered for it. They didn't go out. They weren't protesting en masse. They didn't have like a political party that they could attach themselves to. If they declared themselves the faith that they had, they would instantly be killed. Those were the saints, and all they had to do was follow the basics of the basic tenets of the faith. They didn't have to be these giant figures in the world. And then when you get into Christendom, the saints of those times were those who did significantly more, suffered significantly more, and were hurt significantly more because the world made it easy to be Catholic. And when it's easy to be Catholic, it's hard to be a saint. When it's hard to be Catholic, it's easy to be a saint. That's it. That's all I got. I got to go get a pizza.
All right, real quick. Thank you, Catholic Comedy, for jumping on, man. That's so great. Thank you so much, folks. If you like what he has to say, please check out his show that he does with my good friend Christopher. It is called Good Night Everybody on YouTube. Good night, everybody on YouTube. Subscribe to that show. They have a
Starts
show
in an hour.
Yeah, starts, but you're going to watch News from the Pew, and then you're going to watch Good Night Everybody. But now, subscribe to this channel. Follow him on X. It's Catholic Comedy. Great follow. And once again, thank you for giving me so much of your time. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
All right. So, yeah, good night, everybody. Check them out. Great show. Great guys over there. And really, I didn't expect it. I put a call out to everybody. I was like, hey, if you want to come on the show, we can talk. And so good for him. Good for him. Thank you for coming. He's a really smart guy, really funny guy too. And something that, being humorous is something that sometimes Catholics look down on. We shouldn't look down on it. But there's a couple things that just about the conclave today. The most interesting thing about our new Holy Father is that he was made a cardinal 2023. He was made a cardinal a little over a year ago. He is a very young cardinal by any means. And down here we go. There's something that ahead of the 2025 conclave, he was being promoted as a possible compromise candidate if leading candidates were unable to attain enough votes. His lengthy missionary service in Peru allowed him to be seen as a more universal candidate than an American like a Cardinal Dolan, which mitigated problems associating with choosing a pope from a superpower. So it's very interesting that he got selected because it looks like Parolin or Tate, the guys that everybody thought were going to, the Vatican Secretary of State, that guy, that was Benedict XVI. That's usually the front runner, but there were things that came up about him. Zuppi was another one. Tate was another one. And then, of course, everybody's dark horse favorite, Pete Zabala, which I don't know. We'll never know how the votes were cast. I don't know. If you know where the votes were cast, you let me know. I don't think we'll ever know how that is. But it looks like he was the one that everybody could agree on because everybody else was kind of in their camps. And maybe that's just the last time we had something like that, and I'm not comparing the two, was the election of John Paul II, because the Italians couldn't agree on a pope. So I heard that listening to the Vatican media, the Vatican live stream, as we all stared at a chimney 2 days straight. But one of the last times we got a pope elected, not as a compromise, but as kind of a dark horse or somebody out of nowhere, was Pope John Paul II, because the Italians couldn't agree, and they were split on their votes, and that's where Pope John Paul II did. Gee, thank you so much. I will see you on News from the Pew in a little bit. So yeah, that is it. I'm absolutely. Of course, they say he might be considered too young and too recent to be a serious candidate. The second thing that is very interesting is he's elected. We talked about it before. He was elected to counter Trump. He was also, that's been floated around, he was elected for the American money. We'll see if that's true or not. I'm just saying he's here. There's very much we don't know about the guy as far as how he is going to operate his pontificate. And that was a great question, Andrew. How long do you think it's going to take? I would take the same view, and Catholic Comedy was 100% correct. I'd say, as a historian, I have a history degree from the Rhode Island College. I don't mean to brag. But as a historian, you can't judge somebody's impact of their pontificate in real time because it's impossible to see the long-term ramifications. We're really just starting to see the ramifications of Benedict the 16th retiring or leaving the seat and the long-term ramifications that have happened because of that. We really won't know the impact of Francis. Some would argue, and you may hear this, that Leo the 14th is the last ditch effort of the Vatican II, even though this is the first I heard this was the first conclave that didn't have anybody that participated in Vatican II. I don't know if that's correct or not. But this is like the last ditch attempt to like kind of keep that, that's why they elected him so young, to keep that mindset going forward. We don't know. We really don't know. Yeah, I think the thing with Francis, and this is all speculation on my part, take it with a grain of salt. I think kind of like how, and I'm going to compare the two, just how they ran things. When Joe Biden was put in 2020, they went full bore because they thought they had the wind at their backs to try and just change everything forever. And I think with Francis, they kind of did that just with the name, and they wanted to be a reformist church, and they just went right, and Francis just went right after it right away to try to use the wind at his back because he was more politically motivated, and he had things on his mind that he wanted to do. So you're right. Francis was understood right away for that reason. He was also a cardinal for a lot longer before he was elected. So he kind of had, because every cardinal has their name and what they would do set up. They're kind of like senators in the US. They all know what they would do as president, blah, blah, blah. So you bring up a great point, Andrew. We'll have to see. And that's all. What we can do is pray, hope, and don't worry, as my brother Cesar said earlier. Social media. And this is so interesting. And I'll end on this because I do have to end and then get ready for news from the pew in a half hour. This was the first conclave that had a social media presence, and the constant speculation and the constant talking about it. Obviously that was happening before, but it was just so focused. The whole world was focused on the Catholic Church for the last 2 weeks, ever since Pope Francis died on Easter Monday. Looking at the church, what are we going to do? Which means the church is the main character of the world because it is the church of the one true faith of our Lord and Savior. Now, of course, everybody's going to go back and do whatever they want to do, but the social media impact and the way people covered it and the quick reactions and all these other things, I mean, it's obviously not good. You're right. Social media brain does not help with the excessive speculation because everything he's going to do, he wore a black vestment today and it's the third day of Sunday and this means this. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. Whatever. But I really just want to echo with Catholic Comedy. I honestly, I'm so blown away that he took some time to hang out with me. That was so cool. And he really brought so much more to the show than I could have ever done. We don't know. People are going to tell you things. Let's pray. If you are disappointed with Pope Leo XIV, if you are, I encourage you to take that disappointment and that frustration and channel it into acts of mercy. Praying, fasting, rosaries. Don't give in to the social media pressure. Don't give in to the enemy's temptation of lashing out in anger, because that's what he wants. He wants us to lash out. He wants us to argue, to be divisive. He wants us to argue. This is supposed to be a happy day. It's supposed to be a joyous day. We have our Pope, and yet we spent most of the day arguing with each other, and we spent most of the day being miserable or being angry or any of these other things. We are Catholics. We're built for suffering. We're built for this kind of stuff. We are meant to be, now's the time to put down the Deus Vult memes and actually live it, right? God's will be done. Well, it's his church. This is how it went. I'm not saying he picked them, but this is, the Cardinals had free will. They picked it. God allows everything to happen. And yeah, I don't have like a solid outro. I don't have a solid outro on this, but I thank you guys for hanging out with me. I gotta give Catholic Comment. I think I gotta send him like a pizza or something. I haven't had this many people on X in a long time, and that's all Catholic Comedy. That ain't my ugly stupid face. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on News from the Pew. This is going to be it for me as far as Pope Leo XIV commentary. It's not going to be, we're not doing Pope Leo watch every day for the rest of his pontificate. I won't even comment unless it's off the Andrew. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Awesome. Anytime somebody says that, I'm blown away. And I appreciate you. Without you, the show is nothing. An old school guy, huh? Yeah. Well, I'm here every night at 6 p.m. Central. And then if you want, I'll drop the link for the News from the Pew with Steve Cunningham. Me and Steve do a show every Thursday at 8:30 Eastern time. The Pew. And I know he's going to have some stuff to say, although we're not going to spend too much time. Steve is absolutely, he is absolutely 100% not going to spend the whole show on Pope Leo XVI. It's going to take me a long. Is it going to take anybody else a while to not say Pope Francis? Because I'm so used to saying that. Pope Leo XIV. Pope Leo XIV. But yes, don't worry. God's in control. Take care, men, take care of your family. Mothers and wives, take care of your husbands and your children. It's a good day. Sit back. The tension of not having a Holy Father is over. He's there. And now we can get back to living our lives of being good Catholics and aiming to do what? Aiming to get to heaven. All right, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me here. I will talk to you all, if you want, in about 20 minutes. I'll see you on News from the Pew. If not, I'll see you tomorrow night here on RickCast, where we're going to go back to news and politics and culture and all the stuff that we can talk about. God bless, ladies and gentlemen. And until that day comes, free Dexter Taylor. God bless y'all.